Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into the life of a king whose final exit was sounds like a Monty Python sketch. We're talking about Charles II of Navarre, a man history has slapped with the rather unsubtle nickname Charles the Bad. We'll walk with him through a life of scheming, betrayal, and big ambitions, all leading to a final moment that involves his doctors, a lot of brandy-soaked linen, and a very, very poorly timed open flame. After hearing his story, you might start to think your own bad days aren't so bad after all. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support really does make these late night sessions possible. And hey, drop me a comment below with your city and what time it is for you. It's always cool to see where everyone is tuning in from as the world gets quiet. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in the castle is thick with the scent of beeswax, grief, and something else fear. It's the year 1349. The world outside the stone walls of your palace in Pamplona is reeling. The Great Plague has been sweeping across Europe like a fantomone, leaving silence and sorrow in its wake. It's a terrible time to be alive, but an even more precarious time to suddenly become a king. And yet, here you are. At 17 years old, the crown of Navarre is now yours. Your mother, Queen Jean II, is gone, another victim of the relentless pestilence. You stand before a mirror, but you don't really see your own reflection. You see a title. Charles II, King of Navarre and Count of Navarre. You trace the shape of the crown in the polished silver. It feels heavy, even in your imagination. Your kingdom, Navarre, is, let's be honest, it's not exactly the big prize. It's a proud ancient kingdom, yes, nestled dramatically in the Pyrenees Mountains, wedged between the behemoths of France and Castile. Whoever controls Navarre controls the crucial mountain passes, a fact you understand better than anyone. It's a valuable piece on the chessboard of Europe, but a small one. And you, Charles, were not made for small things. This is the central, burning core of your existence. You believe with every fiber of your being that you'd have been wronged, robbed. Your mother, Jean, was the daughter of a French king, Louis X. By rights, she should have been Queen of France. But the French nobility, horrified at the thought of a woman on the throne, dusted off an old, convenient piece of legislation called the Sully Sea Law, which basically said, no girls allowed. So the throne of France passed to your mother's uncle, and your direct line to the most powerful throne in Christendom was severed. They gave your mother Navarre as a consolation prize. A pretty, mountainous consolation prize. You clench your jaw. You inherited your mother's charm, her intelligence, and her title. But you also inherited her grudge, and you've magnified it 1,000 times. You look at your cousin now sitting on the French throne, and you don't see family. You see a placeholder, a usurper. This conviction will be the engine of your life, driving every decision, every alliance, and every betrayal. But here's the thing, history hasn't quite settled that nickname of yours, Charles the Bad, or L'Homme of Os in French. Did you earn it right away? Was the ink on your coronation vows barely dry before you started scheming, or is that just the story your enemies, the French, wanted everyone to believe? Historians still lean back in their chairs and argue about this one. Some say the name was a posthumous smear campaign, a final little twist of the knife from your lifelong rivals. You were just genuinely a handful from the get-go, a born troublemaker with a crown. For now, though, you're just a young man with a new kingdom and an old grievance. The weight of your new responsibilities sits on your shoulders, but it's not the administration of Navarre that occupies your mind. It's not the economy, or the plague, or the welfare of your subjects. No, your gaze is fixed eastward towards Paris. You see your small mountain kingdom not as a home, but as a Lompax, a stepping stone. You will get what you believe is rightfully yours. You don't know how yet, and you certainly don't know the cost. But, as you turn away from the mirror, a quiet, dangerous resolve settles over you. The game has just begun. The journey from Pamplona to Paris is like stepping from one world into another. You leave behind the sharp, clean air of the Pyrenees, the stoic silence of your mountain fortresses, and descend into the sprawling, chaotic heart of France. The roads get wider, muddier, and infinitely more crowded. The villages bleed into towns, and the towns into the grand suburbs of a city that feels like the center of the universe. And Paris, sir. Paris in 1352 is a spectacle. Street criers, the stench of the Seine, and the dazzling glint of wealth. It's loud, it's alive, and it's everything your ambitious heart desires. Your purpose here is clear: marriage. You are to wed Joan of Valois, the daughter of the French king, John II. On paper, it's a brilliant move for everyone. For King John, it's a way to pacify the troublesome, grudge-holding King of Navarre. Marry him into the family, give him a title, and hopefully he'll settle down. For you, it's a direct insertion into the inner circle of power. You're not just a neighboring king anymore, you're family. You're in the room where it happens. The wedding is as lavish as you'd expect. The cathedral is a forest of stone and stained glass. The choir's voices soar to the heavens. And your bride is, well, she's a king's daughter. The union is a contract, a political maneuver, and you both know it. But as you stand at the altar, you're not just looking at Joan. You're looking at her father, King John II, and you are taking his measure. He is a man who desperately wants to be a great king, steeped in the romantic ideals of chivalry and honor. He loves grand gestures, lavish ornaments, and the idea of leading a crusade. But you can see the cracks in the facade. He is impulsive, hot-headed, and a terrible judge of character, surrounding himself with a clique of fawning favorites. He sees your marriage to his daughter as a magnanimous act of royal grace. You see it as the first step in a very long chess match, and you believe your opponent is not as clever as he thinks. You settle into life at the French court, and you play your part beautifully. You are charming, witty, and impeccably dressed. You flatter the right people, laugh at the king's jokes, and act the part of the devoted son-in-law. But beneath the surface, you are a student of discontent. The court is a snake pit of whispered rivalries and simmering jealousies. Every noble family has a grievance, a perceived slight, a desire for more power. You listen, you learn, and soon you have a grievance of your own. A very big one. As part of your marriage agreement, you were promised a large dowry, including significant lands in Normandy that were once held by your ancestors. This was the key to the deal. But the payment, it falters. The money arrives in trickles, if at all. King John, ever the spendthrift, seems to have other priorities for his treasury, namely, showering gifts and titles upon his new favorite, a man named Charles de Locherde, the Constable of France. This is more than a financial inconvenience, it's a public humiliation. You, the King of Navarre, son-in-law to the King of France, are being treated like a second-rate creditor, while this upstart Locherde is parading around in titles and lands that you feel should be yours. The old wound, the one about the stolen French crown, begins to throb with fresh pain. It confirms every suspicion you've ever had: the Valois kings will never respect you. Here's where historians still can't agree on your mindset. Were you a genuine partner, pushed into opposition by King John's broken promises and blatant favoritism? Or was this the moment you'd been waiting for all along? Did you seize upon the dowry issue as the perfect excuse, the moral high ground from which to launch the campaign of chaos you'd been planning since you first set foot in Paris? It's a classic chicken or the egg debate of medieval politics. At the opulent royal feasts, you watch Charles de Locherde. You see him laughing with the king, draped in velvet paid for by the royal purse. And you have to sit through dinners featuring bizarre medieval delicacies, things like peacocks red dressed in their own feathers or massive jelly sculptures called subtleties, all while smiling politely and pretending you aren't being cheated. The injustice of it all curled a less in your stomach. Paris is no longer a glittering prize. It's a battlefield, and you've just identified your first target. Your charming smile does waver, but behind your eyes a cold, calculated plan is beginning to form. The winter of 1353 is cold, but the political climate in northern France is about to get a whole lot colder. You've had enough. The endless courtly charade, the broken promises, the sight of Charles de Locherde swinging around as the king's favorite, it all coalesces into a single, sharp point of action. You decide that if you can't get satisfaction through diplomacy, you'll take it by force. Not on the battlefield, not yet. You're going to be more direct. You retreat to your lands in Normandy, the very lands that are a source of constant friction. Here you are the master. The air is free from the stifling protocols of the Paris court. You surround yourself with a loyal inner circle, mostly hot-headed young Navarre and Norman knights who share your sense of grievance and your taste for adventure. Among them is your own brother, Philip of Navarre. You hold a council of war, but it's less of a debate and more of a declaration of intent. You lay out your plan, your voice low and steady. Charles de Locherde, the Constable of France, the man who holds the lands and favor that should be yours, must be removed permanently. This isn't just a rash decision born of anger. It's a calculated political act. In the hyper-chivalrous world of 14th century France, killing a rival was just murder, it was a statement. You're not just eliminating the man, you're attacking the king's judgment. You're showing the world that you are not a man to be trifled with. You are demonstrating in the most brutal way possible that there are consequences for disrespecting the King of Navarre. The target is staying in a small town called El Aigle in Normandy. He feels safe there, far from the capital, surrounded by his own men. He has no idea that you are even in the region. You gather a small, hand-picked team. This is not a job for an army, it requires speed, stealth, and utter ruthlessness. You ride through the freezing January night, your breath plumbing in the dark, the hooves of your horses muffled on the frosted ground. There's a grim excitement in the air, the thrill of a predator closing in on its prey. You arrive at the inn where the constable is lodging. There's no grand storming of the gates. Your men slip through the shadows, silent and efficient. They secure the building before anyone inside knows what's happening. You, Charles, King of Navarre, are right there with them. According to some chronicles, you wait outside, holding the horses, a detail that has fascinated historians for centuries. Does it show a hint of cowardice, a desire for plausible deniability, or is it the mark of a master delegator, a leader who trusts his men to do the job while he keeps watch? The accounts are murky, colored by the bias of their authors. Your brother Philip leads the charge inside. They burst into the room where Charles de Locherde is sleeping. It's a brutal, messy affair. The constable, jolted from his slumber, is defenseless. The official story, the one you will later proudly proclaim, is that he was killed in a fair duel. But the reality, whispered in the corridors of power, is that it was a cold-blooded assassination. Once the deed is done, your men emerge from the inn, the work complete. You don't linger. You mount up and ride hard, melting back into the night. But you're not hiding. The very next day, you do something utterly audacious. You openly, proudly, and publicly claim responsibility for the act. You ride to the nearby city of Navarre, and in front of a stunned assembly of nobles, you declare that you killed Charles de Locherde, but that it was a matter of honor. You spin a tale of insult and righteous vengeance, painting yourself as the wronged party who was simply reclaiming his honor. You even have a manifesto of sorts drawn up, listing all your grievances against the man you just had eliminated. This is where your reputation as Charles the Bad really begins to crystallize. It's one thing to have a rival killed in the shadows, it's another thing entirely to own it, to justify it, to wear it like a badge of honor. You have thrown a gauntlet at the feet of King John II. You haven't just killed his favorite, you've publicly declared that he was right to do so. You've created a political crisis of the highest order. The King of France now has a choice there. Either he swallows this monstrous insult from his own son-in-law, or he declares war on you. You've rolled the dice, and now all of France holds its breath, waiting to see where they will land. The game just got deadly serious. The news of the assassination hits the French court like a physical blow. King John II is incandescent with rage. It's a deeply personal attack. He didn't just like Charles de Locherde, he loved him. This wasn't merely the murder of a high-ranking official, it was the murder of a dear friend, carried out by his own treacherous son-in-law. His chivalric code screams for vengeance. His authority as king demands it. He declares you a traitor and immediately begins to assemble an army to march on your Norman lands. For a moment it looks like your audacious gamble has backfired spectacularly. You poke the bear, and now it's coming to tear you apart. You brace yourself in your fortress at Navarre, preparing for a siege. The walls are strong, your men are loyal, but you are catastrophically outnumbered. The full might of the French crown is about to crash down upon you. But this is 14th century politics, a landscape of shifting alliances and pragmatic betrayals. And you have an ace up your sleeve the channel. You send emissaries to England, to King Edward II. This is the ultimate act of treason in the eyes of the French. France and England are locked in the bitter struggle of the 100 Years' War. Contacting Edward is like a modern politician calling up the leader of an enemy state for support. You will recognize him as the rightful king of France, a direct slap in the face to your father-in-law, John, if he will send troops to help you defend Normandy. This move terrifies the French court. The last thing they want is another English army landing on French soil, especially not one with a convenient, well-fortified base of operations in Normandy, supplied and supported by you. Your threat works perfectly. Suddenly, King John's furious charge toward vengeance grinds to a halt. His counselors, far more pragmatic than their hot-headed king, urge caution. A war with Navarre is one thing, a war with Navarre and England is a disaster waiting to happen. Reluctantly, furiously, John is forced to the negotiating table. This leads to the Treaty of Mantes and 354th. It is by any measure a stunning victory for you. Not only are you granted a full pardon for the murder of the Constable of France, but you also get most of the lands and money you were originally promised. You essentially get away with murder and get paid for it. You have to perform a little ceremony of submission, kneeling before the king and saying you're sorry, but everyone knows it's a farce. You walk away with more power, more land, and a fearsome reputation. You return to the French court, and the atmosphere is thick with a tension you could cut with a knife. You are the man who murdered the king's favorite and got away with it. People look at you with a mixture of fear and awe. You are a walking, talking symbol of the king's weakness, and you revel in it. But King John II is not a man to forget a grudge. HES just biding his time. He watches you, his smile thin and brittle. The turning point comes in April 1356. The king's son, the Dauphin Charles, the future King Charles V, is now the Duke of Normandy. In a gesture of reconciliation, he invites you to a grand banquet at his castle in ruin. All the great nobles of Normandy will be there. It's supposed to be a feast to mend bridges. You arrive confident and perhaps a little too arrogant. You take your seat of honor beside the Dauphin. The wine flows, the food is plentiful, the minstrels play. It all feels perfectly normal. And then, the doors burst open. King John II himself strides into the hall in full armor, his helmet on, visor down. HES flanked by a heavily armed retinue. The music dies. The laughter freezes in the air. A collective gasp sucks the oxygen out of the room. This is muffled and metallic through his helmet, points a gauntleted finger directly at you. Let no one move, whatever he may see, if he does not want to be dead by this sword. Panic erupts. The king's men seize you and your closest companions. John II is in a state of theatrical, uncontrolled fury. He grabs you by the collar, screaming traitor. You are not worthy to sit at my son's table. He accuses you of fresh conspiracies, of plotting against him with the English. Whether these new accusations were true or just a pretext is a subject historians still debate. Some believe you were genuinely caught in a new plot, others argue John simply created an excuse to finally get his revenge. It's a scene of pure chaos. You are dragged from the hall, your fine courtly clothes torn, your dignity stripped away. You are no longer the cunning political player, you are a prisoner. The king personally oversees your arrest, his rage making him clumsy and terrifying. You are bound and summarily shipped off to Paris. There is no trial, no treaty, no negotiation this time. You are thrown into the dungeons of the Louvre, a fortress prison on the banks of the Seine. The heavy stone door slams shut, and you are plunged into darkness. The tables are turned with breathtaking speed. One moment you were the guest of honor, the next, you are a political prisoner, your life hanging by a thread, completely at the mercy of the man you have so profoundly wronged. The darkness of your cell in the Louvre is a profound shock to the system. One day you're feasting in a ducal castle. The next your world has shrunk to the dimensions of a cold, damp stone box. The fine silks and velvets are gone, replaced by rough prison clothes. The scent of roasted meats and spiced wine is replaced by the smell of mildew and despair. Days and nights blur into one long, monotonous twilight, punctuated only by the guard's footsteps and the meager meal shoved through a slot in the door. Your mind, so used to constant scheming and political maneuvering, races in the confines of your prison. You replay the scene over and over. Was it a trap from the start? Did the Dauphin know? Or was he as surprised as you were? You curse your own arrogance, your complacency. You had underestimated the depths of King John's hatred. Meanwhile, the world outside your cell is turning upside down. Your imprisonment doesn't bring the stability King John had hoped for. Instead, it throws gasoline on the fire. Your supporters in Normandy and Navarre are outraged. Your brother, Philip, immediately renounces his allegiance to France and throws his full support behind the English. The alliance you had only threatened before now becomes a brutal reality. English troops, led by the Duke of Lancaster, land in Normandy, and with the help of your Navarre partisans, they begin to wreak havoc. Your arrest, meant to be a show of strength, has instead triggered a full-blown invasion. Then comes the bombshell. In September 1356, just a few months after your capture, King John II, leading his chivalric army against the English at Poitiers, suffers a catastrophic defeat. Not only is his army annihilated, but the king himself is captured. It's a national humiliation of unimaginable proportions. The King of France is now a prisoner in England. Suddenly France is leaderless. The government falls into the hands of the man who hosted that fateful dinner, the Dauphin Charles, a young, inexperienced ruler facing a crisis of legitimacy, an empty treasury, and a country swarming with English soldiers and rogue mercenary companies. The kingdom is dissolving into anarchy. From your prison cell, news of these events trickles in. The irony is almost too much to bear. Your great rival, the king who threw you in this dungeon, is now a prisoner himself. And his kingdom is paying the price. This chaos is your opportunity. Your name, once a byword for treason, is now being whispered in the streets of Paris as a potential savior. People remember your charisma, your bold defiance of the unpopular King John. A powerful Free Navarre party begins to form, agitating for your release. Your supporters don't just rely on politics, they take direct action. You are a high-profile prisoner, constantly moved from one fortress to another to prevent any rescue attempts. From the Louvre, you are taken to the fortress of Arleux, far to the north. But your network is vast and determined. A rescue plan is hatched, a masterpiece of coordination and audacity. One night in November 1357, a group of about 30 men, led by a Navarre knight named Jean de Piquet, approaches the castle of Arleux. They use forged documents and claim to be a relief force sent by the Dauphin. The ruse works. They are admitted into the fortress. Once inside, they overpower the garrison. It's a swift, professional operation. They find you in your cell. The moment the door swings open and you see the faces of your loyal men instead of your jailers is a jolt of pure adrenaline. You are free, but you don't just sneak away into the night. That's not your style. You descend into the nearby town, and from the steps of a monastery, you deliver a powerful, impassioned speech to the assembled townsfolk. You portray yourself as a victim, a loyal subject unjustly imprisoned by a tyrannical king, who is now conveniently a captive himself. You speak of reform, of good government, of ending the corruption that has brought France to its knees. It's a masterful performance. You're not an escaped convict, you're a returning hero. Your escape is a legend in the making. It captures the popular imagination. In an age of chivalric romance, your story, the dashing king, unjustly imprisoned, dramatically rescued by his loyal followers, is pure gold. Historians still marvel at the sheer nerve of it. It wasn't just an escape, it was a carefully orchestrated piece of political theater. You didn't just slip the lock, you kicked the door down and announced your return to the world stage with a flourish. You ride from Nuix not as a fugitive, but as a conquering hero, making your way slowly and deliberately towards the heart of the chaos Paris. Your journey to Paris is a triumphal procession. As you ride south, town after town throws open its gates to you. The common people, sick of war, crushing taxes, and an ineffectual government, see you as a breath of fresh air. They don't see Charles the Bad, the treacherous murderer. They see a charismatic noble who stood up to the establishment and won. You are handsome, you are articulate, and you tell them exactly what they want to hear. You speak of restoring order, of curbing the power of corrupt officials, and of a fair deal for the common man. When you arrive at the gates of Paris, the city erupts. A massive crowd pours out to greet you, cheering your name. You are escorted into the city not as a pardoned prisoner, but as a conquering hero. The de facto ruler of the city is a man named Etienne Marcel, the provost of the merchants. He's a wealthy, powerful bourgeois leader who has been trying to force a program of radical reforms on the young, beleaguered Dauphin Charles. Marcel sees you as the perfect ally, a prince of the blood with a popular following under serious grudge against the royal family. He sees you as the muscle he needs to push his agenda through. You and Marcel form an unlikely but powerful alliance. He invites you to address the people of Paris. You stand on a platform and deliver one of the most important speeches of your life. You're a master of propaganda. You recount the story of your unjust imprisonment, you lament the state of the kingdom, and you position yourself as the champion of the people. You are so effective that thousands of Parisians adopt the red and blue cap of the reformist movement, a symbol that you and Marcel also wear. For a brief, intoxicating moment, you are the most popular man in Paris. The Dauphin is trapped. He is essentially a prisoner in his own palace, watching as you and Marcel whip the city into a frenzy. You are appointed Captain General of Paris, effectively putting you in charge of the city's defense. You are living in the Louvre, the very fortress that was your prison just a few weeks earlier. The irony is delicious. In the immediate aftermath, the terrified Dauphin is forced to publicly approve of the murders and reaffirm your authority. To protect him, Marcel places the red and blue cap of the revolution on the Dauphin's head. It's a moment of supreme humiliation for the young heir. You now seem to hold all the cards. You have the support of the Parisian mob, the backing of the city's most powerful political leader, and the heir to the throne is a virtual puppet. But here's a little detail that often gets lost in the grand narrative. Your popularity was largely confined to the city. Out in the countryside, the French nobility looked at your alliance with Marcel and the Parisian commons with absolute horror. You, a king, a prince of the blood, were consorting with merchants and inciting mobs. To them, this was a betrayal of your entire class. You were turning the world upside down. This is the central debate among historians about this period of your life. Were you a genuine revolutionary, a proto-democrat who believed in the reforms Marcel was pushing? Or were you a cynical opportunist, using the popular movement as a battering ram to clear your own path to the French throne? The truth is likely a messy combination of both. You probably did sympathize with some of the grievances, but at your core, you were always playing your own game. Your moment as the idol of Paris is powerful but inherently unstable. You are riding a tiger. The mob is fickle, and your alliance with a commoner like Marcel makes your fellow nobles deeply suspicious. The Dauphin, though terrified, is not broken. He is a quiet, patient, and deeply intelligent young man, and he is waiting for his moment to slip the leash. For now, you are the master of Paris, the self-proclaimed defender of the realm, but the city walls can't protect you from the consequences of your own ambition forever. Your control over Paris feels absolute, but you know it's built on a foundation of sand. The city is a powder keg, and the Dauphin Charles has finally had enough. In a quiet, calculated move, he slips out of Paris and begins to rally support from the provincial nobility. He establishes a rival government and starts to blockade the city, cutting off its food supplies. The revolutionary fervor inside Paris quickly gives way to hunger and fear. You realize your alliance with Etienne Marcel and the Parisian commons has hit its ceiling. It has alienated you from the one group you desperately need if you have any real shot at the throne, the aristocracy. More importantly, it's not paying the bills. You need soldiers, you need money, and the Parisian treasury is running dry. So you do what you've always done when you're in a tight spot: you look for a new ally, no matter how toxic. This is a step too far, even for some of your supporters. One thing is to fight against a corrupt French regime, it's another thing to tie with the national enemy, the very people who are pillaging French lands and holding the French king captive. But for you, it's just pragmatism. The English have what you need: soldiers and a shared enemy in the Dauphin. You begin secret negotiations, promising them even more territory and power in France in exchange for their military backing. The problem is, your new friends aren't exactly the most disciplined allies. The English, along with your own Navarre troops and a motley collection of mercenary bands known as the Free Companies, are already roaming the French countryside. They are less like a formal army and more like a plague of locusts, pillaging towns, burning crops, and terrorizing the peasantry. This is the brutal reality of the 100 Years' War. And then, in the summer of 1358, the French countryside explodes. This is the Jacquerie. It's not a political uprising with manifestos and leaders, it's a spontaneous, desperate, and savage revolt of the peasantry, driven to the breaking point by years of war, plague, and crushing taxes from nobles who have failed to protect them. The peasants rise up. They attack castles, murder noble families, and commit unspeakable acts of violence. The name Jacquerie comes from Jacques Bonhomme James Goodfellow, the contemptuous nickname the nobles gave to the common peasant. Suddenly, the entire social order is under threat, and you, Charles of Navarre, find yourself in an incredibly awkward position. You, the friend of the people in Paris, are also a great nobleman and a king. The Jacquerie makes no distinction between a French noble and a Navarre one. To them, all aristocrats are the enemy. Here is where you make a stunning pivot. You see an opportunity to rebrand yourself. The Dauphin is struggling to contain the peasant revolt. You decide to become the man who crushes it. You gather a force of your own knights, join up with other French nobles' men who were your sworn enemies just weeks before, and you march against the peasant army near the town of Mello. The peasants are numerous but poorly armed and completely undisciplined. Your force of professional armored knights is a killing machine. The battle, if you could even call it that, is a massacre. You and your fellow nobles slaughter the peasants by the thousands. It is a bloodbath of epic proportions. This is one of the most debated and bizarre episodes of your life. Why did you do it? Historians offer a few theories. The most cynical view is that it was a purely calculated move to win back the favor of the French aristocracy. By becoming the butcher of the Jacquerie, you were demonstrating, in the most brutal way imaginable, that you were one of them. You were washing the stain of your alliance with the Parisian mob off in the blood of the peasantry. You were reminding the nobility that, when it came to the fundamental social order, you were on their side. A slightly more complex view is that you were genuinely horrified by the Jacquerie. Like every other noble in Europe, you believed in a divinely ordained social hierarchy. The peasants' revolt was an affront to God and nature. In this light, your actions were not just political, they were a defense of your entire worldview. Whatever your motivation, your actions have immediate consequences. You are hailed by the nobility as a savior, the man who stepped up when the Dauphin hesitated. But back in Paris, your ally Etienne Marcel is horrified. How can you, the supposed champion of the common man, be the one to so brutally crush a popular uprising? The alliance between you and him is shattered. You are a prince first, and a revolutionary a distant second, if at all. You have traded your red and blue cap with the people for a blood-soaked helmet, and in doing so you have made it clear to everyone exactly where your loyalties lie. While you're busy playing the great game of French politics, one moment Parisian revolutionary, the next a noble crusader, it's easy to forget that you actually have a kingdom to run. Let's take a step back from the chaos of France and zoom in on your home turf Navarre. What kind of king were you to the people who were actually, your subjects? You return to Pamplona, your capital, periodically. The journey itself is a reality check. You leave the rolling hills and sprawling cities of France and climb back into the stern, majestic embrace of the Pyrenees. Navarre is a different world. It's smaller, purer, and more isolated. The politics here aren't about grand continental thrones, they're about local charters, sheep grazing rights, and maintaining a fragile independence between the giants of France and Castile. As a ruler of Navarre, you present a very different face. In France, you are a disruptive, chaotic force. In Navarre, you are surprisingly conventional. You have to be. This little kingdom is the source of your wealth and your soldiers. It's the home base that funds all your foreign adventures. You can't afford to be a bad king here, at least not in the sense of being a bumbling or neglectful one. You are an active and engaged administrator. You preside over the Cortes, the Navarre parliament, which has genuine power. Unlike in France, where the king's will is becoming absolute, here you have to negotiate with representatives of the nobility, the clergy, and the towns. You can't just levy taxes, you have to ask for them and justify them. And you are good at it. You use your famous charm and sharp intellect to get what you want, often framing your requests for war funds as necessary measures to defend Navarre's honor and rights abroad. You also pioneer some surprisingly modern administrative techniques. You conduct a detailed census, a hearth tax count, to get a precise idea of your kingdom's population and tax base. This wasn't a common practice at the time, and it shows a sophisticated, data-driven approach to governance. It's a fascinating, and somewhat nerdy, little detail about you. While you're plotting assassinations in France, you're also essentially creating spreadsheets back home. It's this administrative grip on your kingdom that allows you to punch so far above your weight on the international stage. But your rule isn't all peaceful bureaucracy. Your constant need for money to fund your French ambitions puts immense strain on your subjects. The taxes are high and relentless. You also have a habit of tinkering with the currency, debasing the coinage to make a quick profit, which leads to inflation and economic instability. So while the local nobles might respect your administrative skills, the average farmer or craftsman likely feels the pinch of your grand designs. And what about your family life? It's just as complicated and politically charged as everything else. Your wife Joan of Valois, the French princess, is trapped in an impossible position. Her husband is constantly at war with her father and brother. She is a pawn in your games, often left behind in Navarre as a sort of glorified regent, or held in your French castles as a valuable hostage. The chronicles suggest a relationship that was, at best, strained and at worst, cold and manipulative. You had children, heirs to carry on your name, but the warmth of a family life seems to have been completely absent, sacrificed at the altar of your ambition. This is the great contradiction of your reign, a point that still fuels historical debate. Was your effective governance in Navarre a sign that you were, at heart, a capable and responsible monarch, and that your badness was purely a product of your toxic relationship with the French crown? Or was your good governance in Navarre simply a means to an end? Were you just efficiently milking your own kingdom to fuel your personal obsessions abroad? There's no easy answer. You walk through the streets of Pamplona, a city far calmer and more orderly than Paris. Your subjects bow respectfully. The royal accounts are balanced, the government functions. On the surface, everything is as it should be, but you are restless. Your gaze always drifts northward, over the mountains. Navarre is your fortress and your bank, but it's not your prize. It's a well-run, well-managed, but ultimately for you, frustratingly small stage. And you are a man who craves the spotlight of a much, much larger theater. Your ambitious foreign policy comes with a hefty price tag, and it's not just paid in taxes and debased currency. It's paid in blood, loyalty, and control. To fight your wars in France, you need more than just your loyal Navarre knights. You need seasoned, professional soldiers. And in the 14th century, the best and most readily available soldiers were the mercenary bands, the infamous free companies. These are not disciplined national armies. They are multinational corporations of violence for hire. They are composed of English archers, German knights, and Spanish brigands, men who have known nothing but war for a generation. Their trade is fighting, and in the brief moments of peace or truce that punctuate the 100 Years' War, they become a terrifying problem. Unemployed and unpaid, they don't just go home. They roam the countryside in organized bands, living off the land. which is a polite way of saying they pillage, extort, and terrorize entire regions. They're the masters of the routiers, the men of the road. You, Charles the Bad, become one of their biggest employers. You see them not as a problem, but as a tool. They are experienced, ruthless, and they have no national allegiance. Their only loyalty is to the highest bidder, and you are oft unwilling to pay. You hire them to garrison your Norman castles, to raid the lands of the Dauphin, and to be the backbone of your military operations. This reliance on mercenaries has immediate benefits. They give you a military punch you could never achieve with your small Navarre army alone. They are brutally effective. When you unleash a company on a region, you know it will be pacified through sheer terror. But you are making a deal with the devil, and the devil always collects his due. The first problem is control. You don't really command these companies, you just rent them. Their captains are hardened warlords. Men like the English knight Sir Robert no less, whose path through France was marked by so much fire and destruction. He was known as the scourge of the land. They will follow your orders as long as it suits them and as long as your money flows. The moment the money dries up or a better offer comes along, their loyalty vanishes. The second problem is their sheer destructiveness. They don't care about the long-term prosperity of the lands they occupy. They are a cancer on the territories you claim to rule. The Norman peasants living under the protection of your mercenary garrisons are oft untreated far worse than if they were under the direct rule of your enemy, the Dauphin. Your soldiers are meant to be your strength, but they bleed your own lands dry and make you hated by the very people you hope to one day rule. This leads to a fascinating historical debate: to what extent were you a master of the mercenary game, and to what extent were you a victim of it? Were you a cunning warlord, strategically unleashing chaos to achieve your goals? Or were you a desperate leader who, once you opened the Pandora's box of mercenary warfare, found you could never close it again? Some historians argue you were a pioneer in this new form of warfare, a prince who understood the power of organized chaos. Others suggest you were simply an arsonist who eventually got trapped in the blaze of his own making. There's a particularly strange and telling episode in the late 1360s. After one of your many failed campaigns in France, you are stuck with a massive army of mercenaries under your command with nothing for them to do. They are a ticking time bomb in your own territory. So, you come up with a brilliant, if utterly cynical, solution. You convince them to go on a crusade against the Kingdom of Granada in Spain, getting a blessing from the Pope in Avignon for the holy cause, but it's all a ruse. Their real target is your rival in the Spanish theater, Peter of Castile. You essentially trick them into fighting your next war for you under the holy banner of a crusade. It's a move of breathtaking duplicity. You sit in your study, maps of France spread before you. You move little flags representing your forces. But these flags don't represent loyal subjects. They represent volatile, dangerous men who are both your greatest asset and your greatest liability. You have built your power on their swords, but you are constantly aware that those same swords could be turned against you. You are the sorcerer who has summoned powerful, dark spirits to do his bidding. You have the power for now. Ever let your concentration waver? As if your reputation for treachery and violence wasn't bad enough, a new and even more sinister accusation begins to cling to your name: poison. In the 14th century, poison was seen as the weapon of cowards, schemers, and the devil himself. It was a crime that invoked a special kind of horror, an invisible death that subverted the honorable, open combat of chivalry. The main target of these rumors is the French royal family. Whispers start to circulate at court, then spread through the cities and towns, that you are trying to poison your great rival, the Dauphin Charles, who, after his father's death and English captivity, is now King Charles V of France. It's not just one rumor, it's a whole series of them, a persistent campaign of insinuation that lasts for years. One story claims you sent agents to the royal kitchens to bribe a cook. Another suggests you had a special gift prepared, a piece of jewelry perhaps. The most famous and detailed accusation comes later, in the 1372. The official French court version of events claims they have uncovered a vast and diabolical plot. Your chamberlain, a man named Jacques Duroux, and your personal counselor are arrested, Under torture, a crucial detail to remember: they confess to everything. Their confession is a lurid, detailed narrative. They claim you, Charles the Bad, consumed by hatred, hired a chemist to create a deadly poison from a mixture of arsenic and other toxic substances. This poison was then to be administered to the French king by a courtier who would gain his trust. The plan was meticulous, they said, and only thwarted at the last minute by the vigilance of the king's men. And the story of your wickedness is proclaimed throughout the kingdom. This is a massive propaganda victory for Charles V. He is known as Charles the Wise for a reason. He is a master of law, public opinion, and political theater. He understands that defeating you on the battlefield is only half the battle. He must also destroy your reputation. The poison plots, whether real or fabricated, are the perfect weapon. They paint you not as a rival claimant to the throne with a legitimate grievance, but as a monstrous, unnatural villain who operates outside the bounds of civilized behavior. So, the big question that historians have been wrestling with for centuries is, did you actually do it? On one hand, it's entirely plausible. You were certainly ruthless enough. You had already arranged one high-profile assassination. Poisoning fits your well-established pattern of using any means necessary to achieve your goals. You had the motive: eliminating Charles V would throw France into chaos and potentially open a path to the throne for you or your heirs. On the other hand, there are very good reasons to be skeptical. The primary evidence comes from confessions extracted under torture, which are notoriously unreliable. A man will say anything to make the pain stop. The French court had every reason to fabricate the entire story. It was the perfect justification for them to confiscate your remaining French lands and to rally public opinion against you. It was a checkmate move in a long-running PR war. This is where the historical debate gets really interesting. Some historians take the French accusations at face value, arguing that the evidence, even if tainted, points to a genuine conspiracy. They see you as a man who simply escalated his methods from the sword to the vial. Others are far more critical. They argue that it's a classic case of a political frame-up. They point out that in an era before modern forensics, accusing someone of poisoning was the medieval equivalent of a smear campaign, easy to allege, almost impossible to disprove. The academic world is still divided is a massive understatement here. It's a true historical whodunit. Let's not forget a weird little tidbit from this era: the fear of poison was so rampant among the nobility that they employed all sorts of bizarre countermeasures. They used serpent stings, actually fossilized shark teeth, and pieces of unicorn horn, narwhal tusks, which were believed to sweat or change color in the presence of poison. High-ranking nobles had official tasters for every meal. You find yourself fighting a war on two fronts. One is with soldiers on the battlefield. The other is with rumors in the halls of power, and in many ways the second one is more dangerous. A lost battle can be recovered from. A destroyed reputation is much harder to rebuild. The label poisoner, once applied, sticks like glue. It seeps into the historical record, forever coloring the perception of your reign. You are no longer just the bad. You are the man who lurks in the shadows with a vial of arsenic, a bogeyman for the French royal house. While your obsession with the French crown consumes most of your energy and resources, you can't afford to ignore the political snake pit to your south. Your kingdom of Navarre is perched atop the Iberian Peninsula, a region that is just as volatile and treacherous as France. Here, the main players are the powerful kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, and their family squabbles make your feud with the Valois kings look almost civilist. You decide to dive headfirst into this mess, not as a king seeking stable borders, but as a classic opportunist. You see the conflict in Spain as another chessboard where you can leverage your strategic position for profit and gain. The central conflict is between two half-brothers, Peter of Castile, often called Peter the Cruel, and Henry of Castamara. They are locked in a brutal civil war for the throne of Castile. This isn't just a local spat, it quickly becomes a proxy war for the two great powers of the age. The English, led by the dashing Prince Edward the Black Prince, back Peter the Cruel. The French, led by their great General Bertrand de Guesclin, back Henry of Trastamara, providing him with a massive army of those very same free company mercenaries we talked about earlier. And where are you in all this? Right in the middle, of course, literally. To get from France to Spain, both the English and the French armies need to pass through Navarre. Your control of the mountain passes makes you the most important gatekeeper in Western Europe. You hold the keys to the war. Your behavior during this period is a masterclass in duplicity. It's so audacious it's almost comical. First, you make a deal with Henry and the French. For a hefty fee and the promise of some Castellan border towns, you agree to keep the mountain passes open for their army to invade Castile. Du Guesclin's mercenaries pour through, and Henry is successfully installed as the new king of Castile. You pocket the fee. Then, no sooner has that happened, the English and their ally, Peter the Cruel, show up on your doorstep. The Black Prince wants to march his army into Spain to restore Peter to the throne. They need passage through your mountains. So you do what any self-respecting double-dealer would do. You make a new deal. You meet with the Black Prince and Peter. For an even bigger fee and the promise of different border towns from the other side, you agree to let their army pass through. But it gets even better. You know that breaking your first deal with Henry will make you a prime target. So, to cover your tracks and maintain a shred of plausible deniability, you arrange your own kidnapping. Yes, you have one of your own Castellanese capture you while you're out hunting. You are held in captivity while the English army marches through Navarre. This way you can later claim to Henry and the French, "I'm so sorry, I would have stopped them, but as you can see, I was a prisoner. It was out of my hands." It is an absolutely shameless, almost theatrical maneuver. Historians still debate whether anyone was actually fooled by this stunt, or if it was just a piece of political theater that all sides tacitly agreed to accept, because it was convenient. Your plan works, sort of. The Black Prince wins a crushing victory at the Battle of Navarre in 1367, and Peter the Cruel is restored to the throne. You, fresh from your escape from your own prison, immediately claim your reward. But Peter, true to his nickname, reneges on the deal. You get nothing. To make matters worse, the Black Prince's army is ravaged by dysentery in the Spanish heat, and he retreats back to France, leaving you high and dry. Soon after, Henry of Trastamara returns, kills his brother Peter, and takes the throne of Castile for good. He is now your very powerful, very angry neighbor, who remembers vividly that you double-crossed him. You have managed to play all sides and have ended up with nothing but an empty wallet and a powerful new enemy on your southern border. This whole episode is a perfect microcosm of your political style, incredibly clever and cunning in the short term, but often disastrous in the long run. You are a brilliant tactician but a terrible strategist. You can win the hand, but you have no coherent plan for winning the game. Your foray into the Iberian chess match leaves you weaker, poorer, and with your reputation for untrustworthiness now cemented on both sides of the Pyrenees. You've been so busy playing everyone against each other that you've forgotten that eventually the game ends, and you have to live with the neighbors you've cheated. Your constant scheming in Spain and your endless conspiracies in France finally push your great rival, King Charles V the Wise, to a breaking point. He's had enough of your double-dealing. Your alliances with England and the persistent remove you from the French political landscape for good. He's not going to try to capture you again. That proved to be a disaster. He's going to hit you where it hurts the most, your wallet and your power base in France. Your most valuable possessions outside of Navarre itself are your extensive and wealthy lands in Normandy, centered around the county of Evreux. These lands are your pride. They were the original source of your conflict with King John II, and they are the main stage for your French ambitions. They provide you with crucial income, strategic castles, and a legitimate foothold in northern France. For Charles V, confiscating these lands is the perfect way to cripple you. In 1378, he orchestrates his masterstroke. It's a coordinated legal and military campaign. First, he brings the full weight of the French legal system against you. He uses the confessions of your supposedly treasonous chamberlain, Jacques Deroux, as the cornerstone of his case. A high court in Paris formally convicts you, in your absence, of treason and lèse majesté, an offense of treason and lèse majesté, an offense against the dignity of a monarch. The sentence is clear. You are stripped of all your titles and lands within the Kingdom of France. This isn't just a paper decree. The moment the verdict is read to powerful French armies commanded by France's best generals, including the legendary Bertrand de Guesclin, march into your Norman territories. It's a swift and overwhelming invasion. Your mercenary garrisons and local supporters are caught completely by surprise. You are in Navarre when the news reaches you, and you are rendered completely powerless. You can't possibly muster an army and march across France in time to save your lands. You have to rely on your eldest son, the future Charles III, who happens to be at the French court at the time. You sent him desperate instructions to rally your forces, to hold the castles, to do something. But your son is in an impossible position. He is effectively a hostage. Charles V summons the young man and presents him with a terrible choice: either cooperate and renounce his father's claims, or be imprisoned as the son of a traitor. Your son, a far more pragmatic and less confrontational man than you, is forced to comply. He can do nothing as the French royal army systematically seize every one of your castles and towns. One by one, your Norman strongholds fall. Some are taken by storm. Others surrender after short sieges. The speed and efficiency of the French campaign are stunning. Within a matter of months, your entire Norman power base, built over a generation of scheming and fighting, is wiped off the map. The crown jewel of your French possessions, the castle at Rome, is taken. The county that gave you your title and your reason for being in France is no longer yours. This is a devastating blow, far more significant than a temporary imprisonment. This is a permanent amputation of your power. It's a financial catastrophe, cutting off a huge source of your income. It's a strategic disaster, removing your ability to threaten Paris or to easily ally with the English in the north. And perhaps most painfully, it's a profound personal humiliation. Charles V has outsmarted you, outmaneuvered you, and decisively defeated you without you ever setting foot on the battlefield. He used your own reputation against you and surgically removed your influence from his kingdom. Here historians debate the long-term impact of this loss. Did it finally break your spirit, turning you from a major European player into a bitter, isolated monarch? Or did it simply redirect your ambitions elsewhere, forcing you to seek new avenues for your scheming? For a while, at least it seems to be the former. You are cornered. You are cornered. Your English allies have their own problems and offer little help. Your Spanish neighbors are hostile. You are left pacing the halls of your palace in Pamplona, a king whose reach now barely extends beyond his own mountain kingdom. You've played the Game of Thrones and, for the first time in your life, you have well and truly lost. Let's step away from the maps and battle plans for a moment and look at the part of your life that the chronicles rarely dwell on: your family. If the courts of Europe were a chessboard for you, then your own wife and children were often little more than pawns, moved and sacrificed according to your grand strategy. The cold political calculus that governed your public life seeped deep into the private chambers of your palace. Your wife, Joan of Valois, has had perhaps the most difficult role of anyone in this story. She is a French princess, daughter of one king and sister of another, married to the man who has become their most persistent and hated enemy. Her entire life has been a tightrope walk of divided loyalties. You married her for political gain, and that's largely how you continued to treat her. During your many conflicts with France, she was your ultimate bargaining chip. When you were in France, she was often left in Navarre to govern in your name, a capable regent who held the kingdom together while you were off chasing glory. But when you needed to ensure her brother, Charles V, wouldn't act too rashly against you, she and your children were effectively your hostages. You moved her to your Norman stronghold of Cherbourg at one point, a fortress practically leased to the English, placing her in immense danger and making her loyalty to you seem like treason to her French family. The historical record is mostly silent on Joan's personal feelings, but it's not hard to imagine the immense strain she was under. Did she love you? Did she resent you for the impossible position you put her in? Or did she, like most royal women of her time, simply accept her duty and play the part assigned to her with quiet dignity? Historians can only speculate, but the evidence points to a relationship built on necessity, not affection. She gave you heirs, she managed your kingdom, and she bore the weight of your notoriety. And what of your children? You have several, but your relationship with your eldest son and heir, also named Charles, is the most telling. From an early age, it's clear that he is a very different man from you. Where you are a gambler, he is a diplomat. Where you thrive on chaos, He craves stability. He will later be known to history as Charles the Noble, a nickname that stands in stark, almost deliberate contrast to your own. You use him as a political tool from a young age. You send him to Paris as your envoy, placing him in the gilded cage of the French court. You make him the frontman for your doomed defense of Normandy, forcing him to choose between obeying his father and surviving the wrath of his uncle, the King of France. He is constantly cleaning up the messes you create, negotiating pardons, and trying to salvage what he can from the wreckage of your failed schemes. There's a telling little detail from the time your Norman lands were confiscated. Your son Charles was so trusted by the French king and so distrusted by you that you apparently hatched a plot to have him arrested and brought back to Navarre, fearing he had gone native and sided with your enemies. The plot failed, but it reveals the depth of your paranoia and the fractured nature of your family ties. You saw potential betrayal even in your own heir. This raises a fascinating question for historians of monarchy and family dynamics. How much of your son's celebrated noble reign was a direct reaction against your bad one? Did he look at your life of constant conflict, your squandered resources, and your tarnished reputation and consciously decide to be everything you were not? Many scholars believe so. They see his peaceful, cultured, and prosperous reign as a deliberate rejection of your legacy. He built palaces while you fortified castles. He patronized the arts while you hired mercenaries. As you grow older, you see this son, this cautious, peace-loving man, and you must have wondered what he would do with the kingdom you fought so hard to maintain. Did you see his prudence as a weakness? Or did some part of you, in your quieter moments, feel a flicker of relief that the chaotic cycle you started might finally end with him? Your family life was not a refuge from the political world, it was a mirror of it, full of strategy, suspicion, and the long, cold shadow of your own ambition. Let's talk about money. Because behind every one of your audacious plots, every mercenary company you hired, every war you fought, and every castle you garrisoned, there was one simple, brutal question: how are you going to pay for it? Your ambition had a voracious appetite, and your relatively small kingdom of Navarre had to foot the bill. You were, by necessity, a master of squeezing wealth from every possible source. Your primary tool, as for any medieval monarch, was taxation. But you were particularly creative and relentless. We already mentioned your famous census, the hearth count, which gave you a precise list of who to tax. You levied traditional taxes on land and property, but you also exploited your kingdom's unique geography. Navarre, straddling the Pyrenees, was a natural trade corridor. You set up customs posts and taxed the mountain passes and taxed the merchants and pilgrims passing through. Every mule train carrying wool to France or wine from it left a little bit of its profit in your treasury. But taxes were slow, and they required the consent of your courtiers, which could be a tedious process. You needed faster, more direct ways to get cash. This is where you got really inventive, and where your reputation as an unscrupulous ruler gets more fuel. One of your favorite methods was currency manipulation. This was a classic move for cash-strapped medieval kings, but you took it to an art form. It worked like this: you would issue a new set of coins, but you would secretly reduce the amount of precious metal, gold or silver in them, replacing it with a cheaper base metal like copper. These new coins had the same face value as the old ones, but they cost you less to produce. You would then use this debased currency to pay your soldiers and your debts. It was essentially a hidden tax, a way to create money out of thin air. The problem, of course, is that people aren't stupid. They quickly realize the new coins are worthless, and this leads to rampant inflation. Prices for bread and goods go up, savings are wiped out, and the economy is thrown into chaos. You did this repeatedly, causing significant hardship for your own subjects. Another of your income streams was, for lack of a better term, organized extortion. You were not above demanding protection money from towns and regions, both inside and outside your own borders. Your mercenary companies were particularly good at this. They would surround a town that wasn't even at war with you and threaten to burn it to the ground, unless the citizens paid a hefty tribute. It was gangster tactics on an international scale. And then there were the loans. You borrowed vast sums of money from anyone who would lend it: Italian bankers, wealthy merchants, and even the Pope. At one point, Your finances were so intertwined with the papal court at Avignon that it's hard to tell where your treasury ended and theirs began. Your credit was often terrible, but your strategic importance meant people were oft unwilling to take the risk. This constant, desperate search for funds leads to one of the more debated aspects of your economic policy. Some historians, looking at your administrative reforms and deficient tax collection, see you as a modernizing financial innovator. They argue that you were building the fiscal machinery of a modern state, creating a centralized system to fund a national policy. In this view, you were ahead of your time, a prototype of the absolutist monarchs to come. Others see it very differently. They argue there was no grand, modernizing vision. You weren't a nation builder, you were just an asset stripper. They see you as a king who treated his own kingdom like a personal piggy bank, smashing it open whenever he needed cash for his foreign adventures. They point to the debased currency, the crippling taxes, and the reliance on extortion as proof that you had no long-term economic plan beyond funding your next scheme. The truth, as is so often the case with you, is likely somewhere in the messy middle. Imagine your treasurer, a man perpetually hunched over his ledgers, his face a permanent mask of anxiety. Every time you walk into the room with a new brilliant and invariably expensive idea, you must have felt a cold dread. Your entire reign was a high-wire financial act, constantly teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. You were a financial gambler, just as you were a political one, always betting that the next big score was just around the corner, and always willing to mortgage your kingdom's future to pay for your present ambitions. So let's take a breath and address the elephant in the room, that nickname. Charles Navarre, Charles the Bad. It's one of the most blunt and endearingly negative royal epithets in history. But was it fair? Was your entire reign just a litany of bad acts? Or is the story more complicated than that? This is where we step into one of the biggest ongoing arguments about your legacy. The case for calling you the Bad is, let's face it, pretty strong. The prosecution's evidence is a long list of everything we've talked about. You assassinated a high-ranking official and bragged about it. You constantly betrayed your treaties and alliances. You sided with England, France's mortal enemy, during the 100 Years' War. You unleashed brutal mercenary companies on the French countryside. You allied yourself with the Parisian mob against the royal family, then turned around and massacred the revolting peasants of the Jacquerie. You were credibly accused of plotting to poison your king. You double-crossed every major player in the Spanish Civil War. You taxed your own people relentlessly and debased their currency to fund your personal ambitions. It's a pretty damning rap sheet. The name Navarre was popularized and cemented by French chroniclers, particularly those writing under the patronage of your arch-nemesis Charles V the Wise. For them, you were the dark shadow that highlighted their king's wisdom and virtue. You were the traitor, the schemer, the poisoner, talking justification for the Valois monarchy's legitimacy. In their narrative, you weren't just a political opponent, you were an agent of chaos, a force of pure malevolence. And since history is often written by the winners, this version of you is the one that has largely stuck. But what if we look at it from a different angle? What if we try to be your defense attorney for a moment? Your defenders, both contemporary Navarre historians and some modern revisionists, would argue that your badness was entirely a matter of perspective. From the French point of view, you were a traitor. But from your own point of view, you were a patriot fighting for your legitimate rights. You believed with conviction that you had a stronger claim to the French throne than the Valois kings. In your eyes, they were the usurpers. Your treason was simply you attempting to reclaim your stolen inheritance. They would also argue that you were a product of your time. The 14th century was a brutal, cynical age. Every ruler was making and breaking alliances. The 100 Years' War was a morass of shifting loyalties. Were you really any more treacherous than your contemporaries, or were you just less successful and therefore more easily painted as the villain? The English king, Edward III, had no qualms about devastating French territory. Peter of Castile was called the Cruel for a reason. You were playing a dirty game, but everyone else was playing it too. And here's the most crucial point for your defense. What about your performance as King of Navarre as we've seen, within the borders of your own inherited kingdom? You were an efficient administrator, a legal reformer, and a king who respected the institutions of his realm, like the Cortes. You kept Navarre independent and secure, navigating a perilous path between much larger, more powerful neighbors. For a Navarre subject, you weren't Charles the Bad. You were the king who kept them safe and made their small kingdom a player on the European stage. They might have grumbled about the taxes, but they likely had a far more positive view of you than a French peasant whose farm had been torched by one of your mercenary companies. This is the central paradox of your reign, the question that keeps historians coming back to your story. Were you a bad man, or a man in a bad situation? Were you a sociopathic schemer, or a wronged prince using the only tools available to him? Was the name Charles the Bad an accurate description of your character, or was it a brilliant piece of political propaganda that has shaped our view for over 600 years? There is no consensus. The debate is ongoing. You are a historical Rorschach test. What one historian sees as treachery, another sees as cruelty, another sees as cruelty, another sees as political necessity. You remain stubbornly complex, a man who was both a capable, modernizing ruler to his own people and an absolute menace to everyone else. You were perhaps not so much the bad as you were the inconvenient, the troublesome, or, most accurately, Charles, the king who refused to know his place. Let's pause your story for a moment and talk about the world you live in, specifically about health and medicine. Because to understand the truly bizarre final chapter of your life, we need to understand the medical landscape of the 14th century. And to put it bluntly, it was a terrifying time to get sick. Imagine a world with no concept of germs, no antiseptic, and very little understanding of how the human body actually works. Medical theory was dominated by the ancient Greek concept of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, The thinking was that a healthy body had these four fluids in perfect balance. Every illness, from a common cold to the plague, was believed to be caused by an imbalance of these humours. So what did a doctor do? Their entire job was to try and rebalance your humours. If they thought you had too much blood, a condition believed to cause fevers, redness, and high spirits, the solution was simple bloodletting. The doctor would either make an incision in a vein phlebite or cover you in leeches to suck out the excess blood. If they thought you had an excess of phlegm associated with coldness and lethargy, they might prescribe hot, dry foods like roasted peppers or ginger to counteract it. It was all about opposites. A hot disease needed a cold cure, a moist disease needed a dry one. Surgery was a brutal affair, more akin to butchery than modern medicine. It was performed by barber surgeons, who were exactly what they sound like: men who would cut your hair one minute and amputate your leg the next. Anesthetics were rudimentary at best, consisting of alcohol, opium, or sometimes a knock on the head. The biggest killer wasn't the surgery itself, but the infection that inevitably followed. The idea of washing hands or sterilizing instruments was centuries away. When it came to diagnosing an illness, one of the most important tools was the urine chart. A doctor would spend an inordinate amount of time examining a patient's urine in a special flask. They would study its color, its clarity, its sediment, and even its smell and taste. Yes, you heard that right. Uroscopy, the practice of water tasting, was a legitimate diagnostic technique. A doctor would have a detailed chart showing what different colors of urine signified about your humoral balance. This is the environment in which you are growing old. And it's not just the doctors you have to worry about. The line between medicine, astrology, and magic was incredibly blurry. A physician would likely consult your astrological chart before prescribing a treatment. The position of the planets was believed to have a direct influence on your bodily humours. Certain procedures, like bloodletting, were only to be performed when the moon was in a specific sign. And for the common person, medicine was a mishmash of folk remedies, herbal concoctions, and religious appeals. You might wear an amulet to ward off disease, pray to a specific saint associated with your ailment like Saint Anthony for skin diseases, or drink a potion made from ingredients that sound like they belong in a witch's cauldron, things like powdered gemstones, dried toad, or moss scraped from a human skull. This last one is a real thing, called usni, and it was a surprisingly common ingredient in remedies for bleeding on wounds. It's a bizarre little footnote in the history of medicine. The historical debate here isn't about whether their medicine was good or bad. By our standards, it was obviously terrible. The real debate is about the mindset behind it. Were these doctors cynical quacks who knew their treatments were useless? Or were they sincere practitioners working within a deeply flawed but internally consistent intellectual framework? The overwhelming consensus is the latter. They genuinely believed in the four humors. They thought they were helping. They were the best and brightest of their age, operating at the absolute peak of their scientific understanding. So as you age and your body begins to fail you, this is the system you will turn to for help. You won't be treated by scientists. You'll be treated by men who believe your body is a battleground between hot and cold, moist and dry, influenced by the stars and diagnosed by the color of your pee. It's a system that sees the body not as a biological machine, but as a microcosm of the universe itself, governed by mystical forces and elemental properties. And it is this very system, in all its well-intentioned ignorance, that will set the stage for your spectacular and horrifying end. As if your life wasn't complicated enough, a new layer of chaos descends upon Europe in 1378, the same year you lose your Norman lands. This time, the crisis isn't political but spiritual. The Catholic Church, the one unifying institution in a fractured continent, splits in two. This is the beginning of the Great Western Schism. For decades, the popes had resided not in Rome, but in Avignon, a city in southern France. They were seen by many as being under the thumb of the French monarchy. In 1377, Pope Gregory XI finally moved the papacy back to Rome, but he died shortly after. The subsequent papal election was a mess. Under pressure from a Roman mob demanding an Italian pope, the cardinals elected Pope Urban VI. But Urban quickly proved to be an arrogant, reform-obsessed tyrant who alienated the very cardinals who had elected him. So a few months later, a group of mostly French cardinals declared the first election invalid due to duress. They held their own conclave and elected a different pope, Clement VII, who promptly moved his court back to Avignon. Now there were two claiming to be the one true successor to St. Peter. Each pope excommunicated the other and his followers. Europe was forced to choose sides. And you, Charles the Bad, see this monumental spiritual crisis not as a disaster for Christendom, but as a golden opportunity. Another chessboard has just been laid out, and you are ready to play. Your allegiances, as you might expect, are completely fluid and based entirely on your own self-interest. Geographically, Navarre is caught between France, which immediately sides with the Avignon Pope Clement VII, and England and Castile, which mostly support the Roman Pope Urban VI. You are in a prime position to play both sides against the middle. Back first, you lean towards Clement in Avignon. It makes sense. He's supported by your powerful French neighbors, and you still have lingering hopes of maybe, just maybe, getting some of your French lands back through his influence. The Avignon papacy was a major financial institution, and being in its good graces could mean access to loans and political favors. You send envoys to Avignon, you make declarations of support, and you generally act the part of a loyal son of the Avignon papacy, but you never fully commit. You always leave the door open to Rome. You allow clerics loyal to Urban VI to operate within Navarre. You send secret messages to the Roman court. Why? Because a schism is a buyer's market. With two popes desperate for support, the price of your allegiance goes up. You can demand concessions, titles, and political support from each pope in exchange for recognizing his legitimacy. This is a very dangerous game. The popes wielded real power. Excommunication wasn't just a spiritual threat. It could have devastating political consequences, theoretically freeing your subjects from their oaths of loyalty to you. But you are a master of living dangerously. Historians who study this period often debate the true nature of your religious beliefs. Were you a cynical, faithless manipulator, using the church's crisis for pure political gain without any regard for the spiritual implications? Others show you as a conventional Catholic monarch, endowing monasteries and participating in religious ceremonies. Your actions suggest you saw the two popes not as spiritual leaders, but as two rival executives of a powerful multinational corporation, and you were simply trying to get the best deal for your own franchise. There's a great, if possibly apocryphal, story that sums up your attitude. When pressed to make a final, definitive choice between the two popes, you supposedly said you would serve the one who paid better. While likely a piece of enemy propaganda, it perfectly captures your reputation. For years, you successfully walk this tightrope. You extract what you can from Avignon while keeping your lines of communication open to Rome. You manage to avoid being excommunicated by either side, a testament to your slippery diplomatic skills. You are a swing state in the great papal election, and you enjoy the attention and the leverage it brings. But the schism also adds another layer of instability to an already chaotic world. It erodes the certitude together, and for you, an aging king whose past is catching up with him, this climate of universal uncertainty is a fitting backdrop for the final, strange act of your life. The years begin to take their toll. It's the 1382 now. The audacious, charismatic young man who once held Paris in the palm of his hand is gone, replaced by an aging, increasingly isolated monarch. The world has changed around you, and your old tricks don't work as well as they used to. Your great rivals are either dead or have firmly consolidated their power. In France, Charles V the Wise has passed away, but his son, Charles VI, is on the throne, and the French monarchy is more stable than it has been in decades. They have your Norman lands, and they have no intention of giving them back. In Castile, your old nemesis Henry of Trastamara is also gone, but his dynasty is secure. Your southern border is locked down by a powerful and unfriendly neighbor. Your traditional ace in the hole are consumed with their own internal problems and peasant revolts. They have little time or resources for your schemes. The international chessboard that was your playground for so long now has very few moves left for you to make. Your reputation has preceded you one too many times. The name Charles the Bad is no longer a mark of a dangerous and unpredictable player, it's the mark of a washed-up troublemaker. No one trusts you. Your word is worthless in the courts of Europe. An alliance with you is seen as a liability, not an asset. The envoys you send are met with polite smiles and firm rejections. The doors that were once open to your intrigues are now quietly but firmly shut. The isolation is not just political, it's personal. Your wife Joan of Valois, the long-suffering French princess, dies in 1373, while your marriage was a political tool. Her death removes one of your last, albeit strained, personal connections to the French royal house. Your brother Philip, your partner in your early violent schemes, is also gone. And then there's your son, Charles, the heir you groomed to be your successor. He is now a man with his own ideas, and those ideas are starkly different from yours. He has spent years acting as your long-suffering diplomat, trying to mend the bridges you so gleefully burned. He has seen the cost of your endless ambition, a solid reputation, and a kingdom constantly on the brink. He openly favors peace and stability. The relationship between you is strained, a mixture of paternal authority and the quiet resentment of an heir waiting for the old man to get off the stage. There are even whispers of plots against you within your own court. In 1384, you arrest your own chamberlain, a man named Ferrando Dayans, accusing him of conspiring with the French. Whether the plot was real or a figment of your aging paranoia is, like so many things in your life, a matter of historical debate. But the fact that you feel the need to stage these show trials in your own palace reveals a deep-seated fear that the rot has spread to your own inner circle. You, the master of conspiracies, are now seeing them in every shadow. You spend more and more time in your palaces in Navarre, in Pamplona or Olite. The world outside the Pyrenees moves on without you. You hear news of battles, treaties, and royal marriages, but you are no longer a participant. You are a spectator. You, who thrived on being in the center of the storm, are now becalmed in a quiet backwater. It's a bitter pill to swallow. All your life, you fought against being relegated to the status of a minor king of a mountain kingdom. You used your intelligence, your ruthlessness, and your boundless energy to force your way onto the main stage. And now, in the twilight of your life, you have ended up exactly where you started, the King of Navarre. Nothing more. The French crown is further away than ever. The grand inheritance you believed was yours is lost forever. You are surrounded by the ghosts of your own failed ambitions. It is a slow, quiet, and for a man like you, deeply painful fade into irrelevance. The fire that drove you for so long is banking, leaving only the embers of regret and the cold reality of your own mortality. Even in the twilight of your reign, with your international influence shattered and your body beginning to fail, the old fire of ambition refuses to be extinguished completely. You are not a man to go quietly into the night. You decide to roll the dice one last time, to orchestrate one final, grand scheme to claw back some of what you've lost. Your target, as always, is France. Your plan is classic Charles the Bad, intricate, treacherous, and wildly optimistic. The new King of France, Charles VI, is young and appears to be more interested in festivities and tournaments than in the tedious business of governing. You see an opportunity in his perceived weakness. Your goal is to reclaim your lost county of Navarre and your other Norman lands. But you know you can't do it through force. You need a lever. Your lever is the city of Cherbourg. This is the last significant piece of property you control in Normandy. It's a vital, deep-water port on the English Channel, and for years you have been leasing it to the English as a base for their operations in France. It is a constant thorn in the side of the French monarchy. Your grand plan is to play a complex three-way game between yourself, the French, and the English. You approach the French court with an offer. You will sell them Cherbourg, finally removing the English presence from the heart of Normandy. In exchange, you want a huge sum of money and, more importantly, the full restoration of all your other Norman lands, including Navarre. It's a bold proposal, essentially asking them to pay you to take back something you shouldn't to their enemy in the first place. Simultaneously, you are in negotiations with the English. You tell them that the French are putting immense pressure on you to hand over Cherbourg. You use this as leverage to extract more money from them for the lease, and perhaps to secure their military support for a new campaign, should the French refuse your deal. You are trying to start a bidding war for the port city, with your lost lands as the ultimate prize. Then, to add another layer of complexity, you try to use your connections at the papal court in Avignon to mediate the deal, hoping Pope Clement I will pressure the French king to accept your terms. It is an incredibly complicated web of diplomacy and deceit, a final masterpiece of political maneuvering that requires all of your cunning and experience. But the game has changed. The French court is no longer run by the impulsive John I or the cautious Charles V. The advisors around the young Charles V are savant of long memories. They see your plan for what it is, a transparent attempt to use an old trick one last time. They have no intention of giving you back the strategic county of Navarre. They know you are a spent force. The negotiations drag on for years. Envoys shuttle back and forth between Pamplona, Paris, London, and Avignon. You pour your remaining energy and resources into this final gambit. You write letters, you issue instructions, you analyze the reports from your agents. For a brief period, it must have felt like the old days. You were at the center of a great international intrigue, pulling strings, playing the great powers off against each other. But the world has moved on. They call your bluff. They are willing to negotiate a price for Cherbourg, but they make it crystal clear that your Norman county is not on the table. The English, seeing you are negotiating with the French, become suspicious and start to consider you an unreliable partner. Your intricate web begins to unravel. This final failure is not a dramatic, catastrophic defeat like the loss of Normandy. It's a slow, grinding, and humiliating fizzle. It's the quiet death of your last great hope. The realization dawns on you that there are no more cards to play. No more clever schemes to hatch. You have run out of road. Historians are divided on the seriousness of this final plot. Was it a genuine, last-ditch effort to reclaim your birthright, a final flicker of the old ambitious flame? Or was it the deluded fantasy of an old man, out of touch with the political realities of the new generation, simply going through the motions of the only thing he knew how to do? Perhaps it was both. You are left in your palace, the letters from Paris containing polite but firm rejections piling up on your desk. The grand finale you had planned for your career has been cancelled. There will be no triumphant return to Normandy. There will be no restoration of your family's honor. The story will not have the ending you tried so desperately to write. The only thing left to face is the quiet, undignified decline of your own body. The failure of your last great scheme seems to break something inside you. It's not just a political defeat, it feels like a final biological one. The formidable energy that propelled you through decades of intrigue and warfare begins to seep away, leaving a void that is quickly filled by the aches and infirmities of old age. And then, something more sinister takes hold. It starts subtly. A tremor in your hands that makes it difficult to hold a quill or a goblet. A nagging weakness in your legs that turns a walk across the great hall into a shuffling effort. At first, you dismiss it as the normal decay of a man approaching his late 50s, an advanced age for the 14th century. But the decline is too rapid, too relentless. Soon, the weakness is no longer just a nuisance. It becomes a defining feature of your existence. You, the man who once rode at the head of armies and stood to address the mobs of Paris, now need the support of two attendants just to get from your bed to your chair. The world, which you once bestrode like a colossus, shrinks to the confines of your royal apartment. The chronicles of the time are not medical textbooks, so the exact nature of your illness is impossible to diagnose with certainty. They describe it in the vague, non-technical language of the aero angueur, a numbness, a general debility. Modern historians and medical experts, looking back at the symptoms, have speculated on a number of possibilities. Was it a stroke, the result of a slow-acting poison in a final, grimly ironic twist? Or perhaps a degenerative nerve disease, something akin to multiple sclerosis or ALS? The prevailing theory is that you were suffering from a severe progressive paralysis, an unknown malady that was systematically shutting down your body. The psychological toll must have been immense. Your entire life was built on action, on movement, on the power to impose your will upon the world. Now, you are a prisoner in your own useless body. Your mind, still sharp and full of the memories of your past glories and bitter defeats, is trapped inside a failing shell. You lie in your great canopied bed, the tapestries on the walls depicting heroic battles and royal hunts, a cruel mockery of your current state. You become utterly dependent on others for everything, for food, for drink, for being moved from one room to another. You, who trusted no one, now have to rely on the hands of servants and physicians for your most basic needs. The loss of control must have been a form of daily, grinding torture. The people of Navarre, who had known you only as their perpetually active, often absent, and always scheming king, now hear whispers of a bedridden, helpless old man. The force of nature who had ruled them for decades was fading away, becoming a ghost in his own palace. Your son, Charles the Noble, takes over the day-to-day running of the kingdom. He does so with a quiet efficiency that is both a blessing and perhaps a source of private resentment for you. The kingdom functions perfectly well, perhaps even more smoothly, without you at the helm. It is the ultimate confirmation of your irrelevance. As your physical world contracts, your reliance on your physicians becomes absolute. They are your last hope. These men, educated in the humoral theories we discussed, hover over you, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and intellectual curiosity. They see your heist at assailment as the ultimate challenge of their craft. They examine your urine, they consult your astrological charts, they feel your weak pulse. They debate the nature of your humoral imbalance. But phlegm causing the lethargy, or a deficiency of hot, dry yellow bile leading to a loss of vital spirit? Their diagnosis, whatever it is, will be the key that unlocks the door to your final, fatal treatment. You, in your desperation, are willing to try anything, and they, in their quest for a cure, are about to propose something truly extraordinary. Your condition worsens. The paralysis is creeping, relentless. Your limbs are cold and heavy, seemingly devoid of the vital spark of life. You lie in your chambers in the palace at Pamplona, a king in name only, entombed in your own flesh. The desperation in the room is palpable. You are desperate for a cure, any cure. Your family is desperate to see you relieved of your suffering. And your royal physicians are desperate to prove their worth. A council of doctors is convened. They are the best that money and royal prestige can assemble. They gather around your bedside, a somber committee of black-robed men, stroking their beards and murmuring in Latin. They have tried all the conventional remedies. They have bled you, but it only made you weaker. They have prescribed diets of hot and dry foods, like roasted game and spiced wine, to counteract the cold and moist nature of your paralysis, but to no effect. They have prepared potions with expensive, exotic ingredients, but the creeping numbness continues its inexorable advance. They are at an impasse. Their entire medical framework is failing. They need something more powerful, a treatment more drastic that can shock your system back into balance. They need to infuse your body with a powerful, concentrated source of heat and spirit to drive out the cold lethargy that has taken root. One of the physicians, perhaps the most senior or the most daring, steps forward with a proposal. It's a radical idea, but it's grounded in the logic of their time. The problem, as they see it, is a catastrophic loss of your body's natural heat. Therefore, the solution is to apply an external source of intense heat directly to the body, to essentially steep you in a life-giving essence. And what is the most potent, concentrated source of heat and spirit they know of? Not fire itself. That would be too crude. No, they turn to a product of the alchemist's art, a substance known as aqua vita, the water of life. Today, we call it brandy or distilled spirits. In the 14th century, distilled alcohol was still a relatively new and wondrous substance in Europe. It was seen as a powerful medicine, a miracle cordial. It burned when lit, a clear sign of its fiery, spiritual nature. When consumed, it produced a feeling of warmth that spread through the body. It was logical, in their framework, to see it as a pure concentration of the element of fire and life essence. The doctor's plan is this: they will take large linen sheets, the finest available, and soak them in high-proof brandy. Then they will wrap you, from head to toe, in these saturated cloths. The idea is that the potent, fiery spirit of the alcohol will slowly seep through your skin, penetrating deep into your cold, paralyzed limbs, restoring your natural heat and driving out the disease. You will be, in essence, marinated in a curative poultice. To ensure the heat is contained in the potent vapors don't simply evaporate. They will then sew you into this cocoon of alcohol-drenched fabric, encasing you completely. You will be transformed into a human sachet, steeping in a bath of pure medicinal heat. From a modern perspective, the idea is utterly insane. It's a recipe for alcohol poisoning and skin irritation. But from their perspective, it was a bold, innovative, and perfectly logical application of advanced medical theory. Historians who study the history of medicine find this moment fascinating. It's a peek into a completely different medical mind, where the symbolic properties of a substance were just as important as its physical ones. The debate isn't about if they were wrong, but why their wrongness made so much sense to them at the time. You, lying helpless in your bed, listen to the proposal. What choice do you have? The alternative is to simply lie there and wait for the paralysis to consume you completely. This at least is an action. It is a powerful, dramatic intervention. It feels significant. The preparations begin. Servants are sent to fetch the finest linen and the strongest casks of brandy. The mood in the palace is a mixture of tense anticipation and fragile hope. The king is about to undergo a radical new treatment. No one in that room could possibly foresee the horrific turn this well-intentioned, logically derived, and utterly mad piece of medicine is about to take. The night of January 1st, 1387 is cold, a deep, biting cold that seems to settle in the very stones of the palace. Inside your bedchamber, however, the air is thick with the fumes of brandy. The scent is overpowering, a sharp alcoholic tang that catches in the back of the throat. It smells less like a sick room and more like a distillery. Your physicians and attendants are ready. They bring in the linen sheets which have been steeping in large basins of aqua vita. The cloth is heavy and dripping, chilled by the winter air but carrying the promise of potent, fiery medicine. You lie on the bed, passive and still, a silent participant in the strange ritual about to unfold. The process begins. The attendants, working under the careful supervision of the doctors, take the first brandy-soaked sheet. It's shockingly cold as they lay it against your skin, but you are so numb you barely register the sensation. They wrap it around your legs, then another around your torso. The work is methodical, deliberate. They are swaddling you like an infant, layer upon layer. They are careful to cover every inch of you from your feet to your neck. Your arms are wrapped and placed at your sides. The fumes envelop you, a thick, intoxicating cloud. Your head is left exposed for now, so you can breathe. You are being transformed into a human poultice, a living, breathing mummy drenched in flammable liquid. The sheer absurdity of the situation is worth pausing on. You, Charles II, King of Navarre, a man whose name once made monarchs tremble, are now a helpless, paralyzed old man being trussed up in alcoholic bedding by a team of well-meaning but misguided doctors. All the schemes, the betrayals, the dizzying highs and crushing lows of your life have led to this once real, pathetic moment. Once the wrapping is complete, the final step begins. An attendant, likely a lady in waiting or a trusted servant, comes forward with a large needle and a thick thread. Her task is to sew the outer layers of the linen together, to stitch you into this cocoon. The goal is to make the wrapping snug, to prevent any drafts from getting in and to ensure the volatile, curative spirits of the brandy don't escape. She works her way up your body, her stitches neat and even. It's a slow, meticulous process performed in the flickering, uncertain light of the candles and torches that illuminate the chamber. The only sounds are the rustle of the fabric, the quiet instructions of the physicians, and your own shallow breathing. You are now completely encased, a helpless, living parcel. You can't move. You can barely feel anything beyond a distant dull coldness. The fumes are making you dizzy, and the weight of the wet cloths is immense. You are utterly at the mercy of those around you. This specific treatment, this brandy bath wrap, is not something you'd find in every medieval medical text. It appears to have been a bespoke, a creative, and ultimately unique solution devised by your doctors. This is what makes your end so particularly bizarre. It wasn't a standard, everyday medical mistake, it was a highly specialized, custom-tailored medical catastrophe in the making. Historians still debate the exact details of the procedure, as they rely on a few, often dramatic, chronicle accounts written after the fact. Was it pure brandy, or was it a mixture of herbs and spirits? Were you wrapped head to toe, or was your head left free? The most common account, and the most horrifying, is the one we are following. As the attendant finishes her work sewing the final stitch near your neck, everyone in the room takes a step back to admire their handiwork. The treatment has been administered. The king is successfully encased in his medicinal robe. Now, all they have to do is wait for the heat of the brandy to work its magic to seep into your body and begin the slow work of healing. The first part of the plan is complete. All is quiet. The stage is now perfectly set for the disaster. The room is quiet now. The doctors, satisfied with their work, have likely retreated to a corner to observe, speaking in low, hopeful tones. Your family members, if present, watch with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The only movement is the flickering of the candle flames, casting long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. The air is still saturated with the smell of brandy. You lie there, a motionless, saturated bundle of linen, feeling the slow, creeping cold of the wet fabric. The initial shock of the application has faded, leaving just the heavy, damp reality of your confinement. You are a king reduced to a piece of medical apparatus. The attendant who so carefully sewed you into your cocoon now steps forward to put the finishing touches on the scene. She is, by all accounts, a loyal and diligent servant. She looks at her handiwork and notices a small imperfection. A long piece of thread dangles from the final stitch she made near your neck. In a well-lit, modern room, she would simply take a pair of scissors and snip it off. But scissors might be in another room, or perhaps she simply doesn't have them to hand. The room is dark, illuminated only by open flames. She wants the king's treatment to be perfect. She makes a small, fateful decision. Instead of looking for scissors or trying to tuck the thread away, she decides on a quicker, more direct solution. She will burn the excess thread off. It's a common enough practice in an age of textiles and open flames, a quick way to seal a thread or get rid of a stray end. She doesn't think twice. It's a minor act of tidiness, a gesture of care. She reaches for the nearest source of flame, a candle sitting on a bedside table. The chronicles don't agree on whether she brought the candle to you, or if she tried to lean you towards the candle. The more plausible and chilling image is of her picking up the candlestick and approaching the bed. She holds the flame close to the dangling thread. Her only intention is to singe that one tiny, insignificant piece of string. She is focused on this minute task, her world narrowed to the point where the candle flame meets the thread. This is the moment that has been immortalized in the story of your death. It's a moment of such profound, catastrophic ignorance that it's almost hard to comprehend. Every single person in that room, the highly educated doctors, the loyal servants, your own family has spent the last hour turning you into a giant, king-sized wick, soaking you in highly flammable liquid. And now, this attendant is about to introduce a flame. Why did no one stop her? This is the question that haunts the narrative, the point that historians and storytellers puzzle over. Was the room so dark that no one else saw what she was doing until it was too late? Were the doctors so focused on the theoretical success of their humoral treatment that they failed to consider the basic, practical properties of the materials they were using? Did the sheer authority of the medical procedure lull everyone into a state of unthinking complacency? It's a concept modern safety experts call normalization of deviance. The situation was already so strange, so far outside the bounds of normal experience, wrapping a king in brandy-soaked sheets, that the introduction of one more strange element, an open flame, didn't trigger the alarm bells that it should have. They had created a fundamentally unsafe environment, and they had all grown blind to its dangers. The flame touches the thread, being cotton or linen, ignites instantly. It glows for a fraction of a second, a tiny orange spark. And then, in that same fraction of a second, the tiny spark touches the brandy-soaked fabric to which it is attached. The outcome is not just predictable, it is inevitable. It is a law of physics, a law they had forgotten in their pursuit of a cure. The instant the flame touches the brandy-soaked linen, the result is explosive. It's not a slow burn, it's a sudden, violent whoosh of blue and orange flame. The alcohol-saturated fabric ignites with terrifying speed. One moment, you are a cocoon of curative hope, the next, you are the epicenter of a human inferno. Panic erupts in the bedchamber. The scene transforms from a quiet sick room into a tableau of pure horror. Servants scream. Doctors shout contradictory orders, their medical composure vaporizing in the heat. The room, which a moment ago was filled with the smell of brandy, is now choked with the acrid smoke of burning linen and something far, far worse. You are engulfed in flames. The very treatment designed to restore your natural heat has delivered a hellish, all-consuming fire. You are paralyzed, sunk into a flammable shroud. You cannot move, you cannot struggle, you cannot even attempt to tear the burning fabric from your body. You are trapped, a living, breathing torch. The agony is unimaginable. A century is a load of pain that must have jolted your numb limbs back to a terrifying final awareness. Your attendants, recovering from their initial shock, rush forward in a desperate, futile attempt to save you. They try to beat out the flames with their hands, with pillows, with anything they can grab. But it's like trying to extinguish a bonfire with a teacup. The alcohol acts as an accelerant, the fire feeding on the very substance meant to be your cure. Every attempt to smother the flames in one spot seems to make them erupt in another. The fire is relentless. It consumes the linen sheets, your bedclothes, the mattress beneath you. The royal bedchamber becomes a scene of frantic, chaotic desperation. Water is thrown, but it seems to sizzle and steam with little effect against the alcohol-fueled blaze. The historical accounts of this moment, though written with the dramatic flair of medieval chroniclers, all agree on the core horror of the event. The French chronicler Jean Froissart, one of our main sources for this story, describes the scene with grim detail, noting how the king was burned within it, all alive. The sheer shock of the event rippled across Europe. It was so bizarre, so horrific, that it became an instant legend, a cautionary tale told in courts and taverns across the continent. How long did it last? Seconds? Minutes? For you, trapped in the center of the blaze, it must have felt like an eternity. The pain, the smell, the sounds of chaos. It was the most horrific end imaginable, a death that seemed almost biblical in its fiery intensity, a punishment of disproportionate cruelty for a life of sin, as some commentators at the time would later claim. Eventually, they managed to subdue the flames. What is left on the bed is a smoldering, blackened ruin. You have survived the initial conflagration, but you are horrifically burned. The chronicles state that you lingered on, in excruciating pain, for several days. This perhaps is the cruelest part of the story. There was no quick end, no merciful release. You were left to lie in the aftermath of the disaster, your body a landscape of unspeakable injury, until your system finally gave out. The irony is staggering, a piece of cosmic black humor so dark it's almost sublime. You, Charles the Bad, a man accused of trying to kill his king with poison and invisible, subtle weapon, meet your own end in the most spectacular, visible, and agonizing way possible. Your death was not a quiet fading away, but a ghastly, theatrical performance. You, who lived by the sword and by intrigue, were ultimately brought down by a piece of thread, a candle, and a catastrophic medical miscalculation. The debate among historians here is less about what happened and more about its sheer improbability. It is a singular event in the annals of royal deaths. There is no parallel. It serves as a grim, almost cartoonish, illustration of the dangers of medieval medicine, a system where theory, untethered from empirical testing, could lead to such a disastrous conclusion. Your death was, in essence, the ultimate clinical trial failure. The smoke clears from your bedchamber, but the stench of the disaster lingers for days, a grim reminder of the horror that unfolded. You lie in the ruins of your bed, a broken and burned man, clinging to a thread of life that is slowly, inexorably fraying. Finally, after days of suffering, on January 1, 1387, the very day the fatal treatment began, you breathe your last. You are 53 years old. Your death, so spectacularly gruesome, sends shockwaves across Europe. It's not a story of quiet court intrigue, it's a gothic horror tale. Chroniclers seize upon it, their pens scratching furiously. In France, your old enemies portray it as divine judgment. It's the perfect ending for Charles the Bad, they argue. A man who lived a life of fiery, destructive passion was consumed by literal fire. It's a neat, moralistic narrative that fits perfectly with the propaganda they've been spinning for decades. God, they imply, has finally passed sentence, and the punishment fits the crime. In Navarre, the reaction is more complex. There is grief, of course, but it's mixed with a profound sense of shock and perhaps even a quiet, unstated relief. The long, turbulent, and expensive reign of Charles the Bad is finally over. Your son, now King Charles II of Navarre, inherits the throne. He is, as we've seen, your polar opposite. He immediately sets about reversing your life's work. He doesn't seek conflict, he seeks peace. He formally renounces his claim to the French throne, the obsession that drove you for half a century. In exchange for a hefty pension, he signs away the rights you fought so tenaciously for. He makes a lasting peace with Castile. He turns inward, focusing on the prosperity of Navarre itself. His reign is remembered as a golden age. He earns his nickname, Charles the Noble, by being everything you were not. He builds beautiful palaces, like the one at Light, a fairy tale castle of soaring turrets and lush gardens. He brings stability and wealth to the kingdom you so often bled dry. His success is, in many ways, the final, silent verdict on your own reign. He proves that another path was possible all along, and so history closes the book on you. But the final judgment remains contested. Who were you, really? The debate continues to this day, a testament to your confounding complexity. Were you the monster the French chronicles painted you to be? Aim and driven by pure, nihilistic ambition, a universal traitor who delighted in chaos? There is certainly enough evidence to support that view. Your life was a trail of broken alliances, violence, and relentless self-interest. Or were you a tragic, almost Shakespearean figure? A prince with a legitimate grievance, a man born with a powerful claim but not the power to enforce it, who was forced into a life of desperate scheming by the injustice of his situation. In this view, you were not inherently bad, but were twisted by circumstance, a brilliant man whose talents were soured by a lifelong grudge. Or perhaps the most compelling view is that you were a transitional figure, a man caught between two worlds. You had the personal, feudal ambition of a medieval lord. Your claim to the French throne was all about blood right and inheritance. But you pursued it with the cynical, realpolitik methods of a Renaissance prince, using propaganda, mercenaries, and a centralized state apparatus. You were a medieval man with Machiavellian instincts, born as entry too soon. Your legacy is not one of castles built or lasting peace treaties signed. Your legacy is your story itself. It's the sheer, relentless drama of your life and the unbelievable, almost mythical, horror of your death. You failed to win the crown of France, but you secured a different kind of immortality. You became one of history's most fascinating villains, a case study in ambition, treachery, and the brutal, often bizarre nature of power. Your end was not a quiet fade to black. It was a blaze of glory, just not the kind you ever intended. The story is over now. The echoes of that chaotic life have faded, leaving only the quiet of this room. The flames have long since died down. The ashes have grown cold. The tale of the king who was cooked alive by his own doctors is finished, a strange and distant memory floating in the vast river of the past. But the telling has been long, and the night has grown deep around you. The world outside your window is hushed, asleep under a blanket of stars. Let the turbulent life of Charles the Bad recede now, like the tide pulling away from the shore, leaving behind only the smooth, peaceful sand of slumber. There are no more schemes to follow, no more battles to witness. Your own journey for tonight is done. It's time to let go. Feel the weight of your own body, safe and warm in your bed. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your own breath, slow and steady. The darkness is a comfort, a soft cloak that muffles the sharp edges of the day. You can allow your thoughts to drift now, to become as lightened and tethered as wisps of smoke, dissolving into the quiet air of your room. There is nothing left to do but rest, to sink down into the deep, soft mattress of dreams. Let the story dissolve, and let the peace of the night take its place. The end of the article. Good night.